Hello there, woman beings, and welcome to another episode of the Woman Being Podcast. I'm Emma, and I'm joined here today, as always, with the phenomenal Kellyanne.
Hello.
Along with the incredible Kelly.
Hi.
And we have a very special guest today, the inimitable Zanah Thirus. We are so thrilled to have her here today. She is a creative strategist by day and a filmmaker on the weekends. She has an amazing podcast about microbudget filmmaking, and she is just a badass woman with so much to say. So we are stoked to get to talk to her, and you're going to love her. So let's just dive right in. This is Woman Being,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
Zanah, thank you so much for being here today. We are so stoked to get to chat with you.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
We are too. So let's just get the ball rolling and get it started with talking about what you do. So you have been involved in writing and producing and filmmaking and now creative strategizing, I guess would be the right way to say that. What got you into the industry?
Oh, man. Well, I will try to say this as succinctly as possible. I was homeschooled until I went to college. And I was, oh, really?
Yeah, Kellyanne was as well.
we could go on a whole tangent about homeschooling, but
Girl.
I was homeschooled until I went to college. And then I started college when I was 14 years old.
Oh, shit. You were one of those.
Wow. Yeah, I was one of those.
Okay.
But at that age, I was a kid. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I first went into zoology because I just loved animals, and that's, what I thought I wanted to do. And it took one class of me dissecting a frog for me to be like, no, just kidding. I don't want to do that at all. But being in that adult environment as a kid, I was constantly looking for escapes, and I found solace in acting. So I really wanted to major in acting. My parents were like, we're not paying for that. So I ended up majoring in marketing and minoring in acting. And in my senior year is when I interned at a talent agency. And that's when I realized that there's an entire world of production behind the camera, not just in front of the camera. So I went back to school for cinema production. I got my master's in cinema production from DePaul University. In my senior year, or my final year of grad school, I posted my reel on LinkedIn, and there was an executive producer at an advertising agency who saw it and reached out and was like, "We're looking for producers." And I was like, sure, I could do that. And so I pretty much just fell into commercial production because A, I needed a job. And then B, it was something I was good at that. So for a while, for 5 years, actually, I was in commercial production. I produced commercials for Nintendo, for Sprite, Fanta, Cox Communications. And outside of that, I was an independent filmmaker. I was taking a lot of what I learned in film school and a lot of what I learned on production sets, and I was producing round the clock, directing round the clock. I'd leave a commercial production shoot and then go make a film with my friends. But that really became exhausting. I think the pandemic really shined a light on the fact that I just kind of fell into commercial production. I didn't actually want to do it. Yeah. So I did a lot more soul searching and like what drives me as a creative, what drives me as a filmmaker, and writing stories that resonate with audiences. Some of my films are like, New Santa. It's about the North Pole doing a diversity, equity, and inclusion overhaul and firing Santa Claus and hiring a Black woman. And then I've got, Daughters of Eve, which explores, dismantling patriarchy and misogyny within the Christian faith. And I'm always distributing my films to schools, to conferences. I care about the audiences and the people. So I wanted a day job that really centered around that. And that's when I landed on creative strategy. So creative strategy is still in advertising. But instead of being at the end of the process where I'm producing commercials, I'm part of the teams where I'm synthesizing market research about audiences and consumers and who's going to resonate with this brand. And then I write creative briefs for the copywriters to write the commercials. So I'm on the beginning of the process. And that's why I say I'm a creative strategist by day and a filmmaker on the weekends.
So cool.
Can I ask, what was key in your process when you were doing your soul searching to like realizing, actually, I think this is what's going to make me tick and what's going to help me thrive? Like, that seems super fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually super tactical. I think I think my producing background, because whenever I want to make a pivot, whenever I want to do something, I'm looking at it as a step-by-step process. So the very first step that I took was writing down every single thing that I did not ever want to do again in terms of my role. So I didn't want to deal with numbers or budgets. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be handed a creative idea and told, just go make it. I wanted to be closer to the project's inception. I wanted to be closer to creating what it is that was actually going to be executed. I didn't want a role that was executional. I knew that much. And so then from there, I did a parallel of like, what are things that I like doing?
Yeah.
I love working with creatives and I love shaping concepts and stories. Being close to scripts is really, really fun for me. I love research. Research is a huge part of my job. And ultimately I want it to be like more involved in what I do, whether that's, qualitative, quantitative, focus groups, or actually interviewing. I really love research. I can dig through 200-page reports and summarize that for creative teams on, cars or alcohol, whatever the brand is. So I knew I wanted research to be a part of that as well. And I wanted something that could easily be fully remote. I love traveling. I don't want to stay in one place for too long. So as long as I have my laptop and I could research and write briefs, I wanted that to be a part of the job too. So looking at everything I didn't want to do and pairing that with what I did want to do, finding roles that fit within that, and strategy just was like the perfect fit.
I feel like that's so, or at least in my mind, it seems so daunting, the idea of like filtering and distilling down like exactly what it is that you want to do. And like, that's such a smart way to go about it, to say, okay, well, I don't want to do all of these things. So what still fills in those gaps? Like what still falls into something that I would love?
Exactly. Because it's like, we spend so much of our lives working. We spend so much of our lives, in this capitalist society that we live in. We have bills to pay. We have things that we have to do. So I honestly just think life is too short to be doing anything that you don't absolutely love. And I can honestly say I wake up every single day and work is exciting for me. When I get briefed on projects, it's fun. I'm no longer being, sent to go produce something, or, whenever I'm traveling somewhere, I'm no longer going to a shoot. I might be going to a focus group or a conference or something of that nature. And being in a space where I'm constantly learning makes work not really seem like work. It seems like it's bettering me as a person. It seems like it's helping me as a creative. And it's something that I genuinely enjoy. And who knows how long I'll be doing this. Maybe 5 years from now, I'm like, well, that's enough of that. Time to reevaluate. But,
right, it can serve you for a season.
For sure. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you already mentioned a little bit some of your films, like New Santa or Daughters of Eve. And you obviously, you create these films that sort of are at the intersection of like race and feminism and sometimes faith. And I'm curious just to hear what it's looked like for you to like walk in those intersections and like why those have kind of been some of the topics you've explored in your filmmaking.
Yeah. I mean, I think the beautiful thing about being a filmmaker with a full-time job is that I'm not making films because I have to sell them or because I have bills to pay. I'm writing what I want to write. I'm making what I want to make. And I don't have to worry about the market per se. So a lot of my films are deeply personal. For me, I really like using film as a vehicle to drive social change. I like when film can be more than just entertainment. That's why I do a lot of, university library distribution, screening at conferences, making sure that my films are a part of events where there's panel discussions and, some of my films even have discussion guides, for coursework and things like that. And for me, just going through life, whether that was being raised in the church and being exhausted by all of the misogynistic sermons and rhetoric that was constantly being preached, and wanting some sort of resource for young girls like me who were frustrated and didn't really have the words, the knowledge, the resources, the guide to be able to articulate where their frustration was coming from and have something to turn to.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. Or, even with my film Black Feminist, it was really hard for me during the resurgence, I think, of feminism. A lot of people were saying, well, you're a Black woman, you can't be a feminist. Because notoriously, the women's liberation movement was very exclusionary to Black women, but the Black liberation movement was also incredibly sexist. So doing a film that was, around the intersection of being both Black and a woman, and talking about the Black liberation movement, the women's liberation movement, and also Black women's contributions to both. It really was, a lot of my films, in short, were made out of frustration and wanting to give the next generation something that they can turn to as a resource, something that I did not have. So they're deeply personal. And I say I make films for fun a lot, but they really have a deeper purpose. It's just not Hollywood. It's just not money. That's just not the purpose of it.
Yeah. I think that's such a beautiful, motivation to make your films. It seems like it's an outpouring of just who you are. And it's just the overflow of, this is all that Zanah is, and it has to come out in film here. And,
for sure.
And then it gets to benefit people as well.
Yes. Yeah. And it makes it really rewarding. Filmmaking, at least the way that I do it as a micro-budget independent filmmaker, I'm not on production sets with 50, 60 folks and, $1 million budgets. So in that way, it's a lot simpler, but filmmaking is still a lot of work.
Yeah.
And if it's something that I want to continue doing, there has to have a meaning to it. It has to be purposeful. And that's honestly what keeps me going. It keeps me wanting to create. And filmmaking is the one thing that I know I want to just continue doing.
Yeah.
Till the end of time, really.
Yeah. It's kind of a little bit crazy that people choose to do this. To make films.
Especially after you've done it.
Yeah, working 10, 15, 20-hour days or something, working so long and working so hard and outpouring all of your creative energy at the same time. We've dabbled in creating short films and working in advertising, and it's it takes a toll on you.
It does.
But when you have such purpose behind it, I think that really is something that you can point to as this keeps you going. This makes it worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
Would it be an aspiration for you to be able to do it full time?
No, it wouldn't.
There you go.
Yeah. I get this question a lot. I think the day that I start to rely on my creative work for my income is the day that I lose a lot of creative freedom. And that to me is maintaining autonomy over my work is the most important thing. Being able to write the films that I want to write, cast who I want to cast. If you're making films with the goal of selling it to a network, attaching celebrity talent to it is what's going to make it, really eye-catching to streamers, to whomever's going to distribute it. And they can attach, top dollar to that and say, okay, well, this person's in it, XYZ. Shooting on, the Arri Alexa instead of the camera that I want to film on, because this network requires it or this streaming platform requires it. So you lose a lot of those very deeply personal creative choices and a lot of the creative freedoms, even down to the script. I've talked to a lot of companies that wanted to partner, but they're like, oh yeah, we love this, but let's change this. And I'm like, no, I don't want to, or we're going to bring on an entire, union team. And I don't want to make films, with a room full of strangers. I want to make them with my friends. And that might be someone who doesn't have, the experience of someone who's, been super famous or been doing it for however long, but it's the person that I want to work with. So I think maintaining autonomy and creative control over my work is way more important to me than being able to do it full time. Mm-hmm. And the way that I'm able to maintain those two things is by keeping a job. I'll just keep it this way. Yeah.
And it seems like that's what keeps it fulfilling to you. Is like, I get to control the creative expression that I think this needs. And like,
for sure,
how exhausting, like, to feel like something that was your baby is now being changed and you don't get to decide the destiny of that, right? Like, someone else now has their hands on it. Like, I'm in awe of you. One, you know yourself so well. Like, you've clearly done so much inner work, right? And also, like, you are a hard worker. You work your ass off. You're making films on the side, which, like we said, we have done.
It's no small feat. Yeah.
It's not. And I'm like, you look well rested. Your skincare is probably on lockdown. I'm like, oh my God, like, she can do it all. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I mean, it definitely, knowing yourself definitely saves you a lot of stress. I will say that, because by knowing yourself, knowing your purpose, knowing your interests, knowing what you really want to do, it helps you say no to a lot of things that are thrown your way. There are a lot of opportunities that are thrown my way consistently, to work with different people, to partner with different production companies. And, I could be a very exhausted human being trying to do it all, but really leaning into my interests, my purpose, what I genuinely want to do, it keeps my stress levels down significantly, for sure.
That's really good.
I'm inspired.
Yeah, it makes me think of, like, I read a book late last year called Burnout, and it basically talked about what we get when we use the term burnout is really like, oh my gosh, Jim in this meeting is so fucking dumb and he won't shut up. Like, right? It's that inner frustration. And so, like, you being able to have, like, creative control reduces that frustration. And so, you're not getting burned out because you're getting to do.
Exactly.
I'm like, I'm like preaching to myself. I'm like,
yes,
Kelly, learn from Zanah.
And I think it's also like, you have to define what success is for you.
Yeah.
And that's really, really tough to do as women, as filmmakers. Like, you really have to quiet the noise, because there's a lot of people who are like, what do you mean you've only been to LA one time? Why do you not want to partner with this person reached out and you declined? Like, it's for me, I had to really take time to figure out how do I see myself as successful and how do I get there? And my definition of success looks a lot different from a lot of filmmakers. And you kind of have to be okay with that, and you kind of have to be okay with being an anomaly. You have to be okay with being the lone wolf sometimes as well too. Because, when people are following a common theme or a way of doing things, they've got community there. And you might not have that at all times, which is okay, because you'll find your people. You find your people when you find your purpose, but that's where the challenges come in, is, really sticking to your guns and making sure that you are focused on truly being happy, like inwardly happy, not externally happy, but actually like being happy with who you are, what you're doing, what your purpose is, because that's key. For sure.
Yeah. Wow. Taking notes.
Yeah. Well, there's so many messages that we get. Like, there's messages we get as women that say, well, success is a family and a backyard and owning a home and having 2.5 children
at least.
And it's those things. And then when you're in something that's such a high pressure environment as like the film industry, success is blockbusters. Success is living the life as a director of having to do one for them and one for you, right? Like, that's what I hear a lot of filmmakers talk about. It's one for the industry and then one that you get to make that's your own creative birthing. And so there's all these ideas that, this huge like essentially fame winds up being the definition of success, and being a household name or creating a film that sells out theaters. But breaking down, okay, why have I been told this is success all this time? And is that really what I myself think is success? Or is this just what I've been told over and over again? So I think that that's what I want. And that is really hard to separate and to break down. I think that is probably a lifelong work for most people. Just to,
it is. Yeah. And it's constantly checking in with yourself. You know, I am that Virgo that has a 5-year plan that breaks down into a month-to-month to-do list that also breaks down into a weekly task sheet. But that 5-year plan is always being edited because, you know, 5 years ago it said I wanted to be an executive producer. And now I'm in a completely different career. So like, what does my life look like? So you can constantly edit those things too. Your definition of success can change as well. And giving yourself grace with that too is really, really important.
Well, even one step beyond that, I mean, figuring out where success belongs for you, but also like, at least something I'm coming up against and struggling with is my next, like working in one place and then getting to the next place and just continuing to serve another person's vision. The closer you get to Hollywood, the more white men that you're like literally working under who have a specific set of values that may not necessarily align with my own. And so I found it harder and harder as a woman to navigate just my profession and my aspirations in the sense of, do I want to achieve this if it costs me having to work in this system or that system? Like what is the benefit I'm trying to get out of it? And then what is the cost? And is it going to be worth my life?
100%. Yeah. Gosh, I can go on a tangent about just how much I am anti-Hollywood and anti the bubble, but it's like, to me, I don't really see any benefit from going that route. And that's not to discourage, you know, there are filmmakers who that is genuinely the route they want to take. But to your point, there's so much gatekeeping there. And there's a lot of, you know, the powers that be that have so much say in how far you can go. And I have always been that person that's like, you know, my independent micro-budget films are the ones that I'm going to be not only in full control of and driving the ship, but my day job is the primary investor in my creative work. And that's the purpose that it serves. I'm not looking to climb the corporate ladder for anything other than more money to make more of my films. Like that's pretty much it. And I think that it's when you're able to lean into your individual purpose and find where your career fits into that, it can mold, it can shape, it can make more sense. You can let go of things, you can move around. I am definitely a job hopper. I follow the bag. Very much so. Like, if this company is not in line with my values, you know, it's not just about the money. I wanted a job that was fully remote. I wanted a job that had flexible PTO. I wanted a job that respected the fact that I'm a creative outside of work and didn't try to capitalize that on my own. Like, there's a lot, you know, that goes into choosing, you know, that career path. So I can talk so much about Hollywood and gatekeeping.
Definitely check out her podcast, Microbudget Filmmaking.
Oh my gosh.
Shameless plug.
It's so good. I binged
Kellyanne
all of
went
it.
on a hardcore bender on your podcast.
Binged it. I was taking notes. My husband bought me all of your workbooks for Christmas because I was like, this is top of the list. I need it. So big fan. Big fan of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, the podcast for me is so rewarding when I hear feedback like that. Because last year, we reached Spotify's top 10 most shared globally.
Wow.
And
congrats.
Yeah, in 51 different countries. And we're almost at 35,000 streams.
Wow.
And you know, it was originally just supposed to be a lecture-based 3-season podcast, 15 episodes, corresponding workbooks, basically a crash course in film school for independent filmmakers. But it's grown so much we're bringing it. We brought back another season, a bonus season of unlimited episodes, and we're just going to continue giving as much knowledge and resources as possible. And again, your feedback is so appreciated, because so many filmmakers are like, this podcast is what led me to make my first film, and they'll tweet the podcast page with the link to the film that they made, after they were rejected from a grant, or after they weren't able to get into film school. And it's just like, that means so much to me. Yeah. So I'm really, really glad the workbooks are useful. The podcast is useful. We're going to keep the episodes coming. The upcoming episode is actually about weekend filmmaking and managing a full-time job, and we've got a weekend filmmaker guide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because literally, again, it's just so valuable. And I found it, we had our discovery call and connected with you at a time when I was steeped in some projects and I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. And I mean, still am. That's how my life goes now at this point. But it's like a joy. And I think you were able to take a lot of the pressure off of like we were talking about earlier, of like, it needs to look like this. And I tell you what, I am ready for the Zanah Thirus Film School. I will sign up. Because you're very like straightforward about it. It's very like, it's short, so it's not too much mental energy to try and wrap my mind around some abstract concept. It's like, this is so practical, and I can apply this to my creative meeting today. Yeah. So that's what's wonderful about it.
We could talk about filmmaking with you all day.
Yeah.
But you also have so much rich history and other things that we want to know, which is you come from a strong faith background, which you've shared a little bit about already. And some of your films, as you mentioned, are tackling some of those taboo topics, at least within the American Christian space. So have you experienced tension within yourself or from the faith communities around you as you delve into those kinds of topics?
Actually, no, which is like probably very surprising answer. But every single time that I do a controversial film, I find more community. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about independent filmmaking, especially in the documentary space. With Daughters of Eve, this was after I had already, created the Black feminist documentary, which was really well received in the university space. And then Unlearning Sex was my personal documentary that I did following my journey through sexual trauma therapy and recovery. And that was also very well received. Through a lot of like sex ed programs and conferences. And so by the time I was like, okay, it's time to tackle misogyny in the Christian faith, I was used to really controversial topics. And this was definitely something that I was eagerly jumping into. I also start all of my documentary films with research and with putting together like a 40 to 50 page deck. Wow. And the one for Daughters of Eve, I think was like almost 60 pages, but it analyzed all the topics. I got so many books that I read with a lot of different, I actually have a couple of them here that I'll pull down. The Inclusive Bible is one of them. This is the first egalitarian Bible where they take out he and she and just put like inclusive language, which was it was really interesting to compare that and see, where the sexism really came in. There is another book. It's called The Feminist and Intersectional Perspectives of the Hebrew Bible. Ooh. And this one was really, really helpful in not only asking, but shaping some of the questions that I wanted to ask the scholars. And then pulling very specific, just umbrella topics. I knew I wanted to address the creation story. I knew I wanted to address whether or not, Jesus was a feminist. I love the book, Jesus Feminist. Yeah. This one is fantastic. Good. So taking that, and then after Jesus left, like the church, Paul, Timothy, like what were in Corinthians, we have a lot of incredibly sexist scriptures, and like what are people's take on that. So and then purity culture, those are like the umbrella subjects that I wanted to tackle in the film. And then using these books, I kind of crafted what questions I wanted to ask scholars, theologians, scholars, pastors. And from there, once I had that framework, that's when I started to reach out to pastors who, identified as either feminist, womanist, whatever that was. And every single person I reached out to, it was like a resounding yes. It was not like there was no hesitation whatsoever. And that's usually the case with documentaries, because a lot of times when you're asked to interview someone on their expertise, they don't really get a chance to be spotlighted in that way. And so we filmed the film in 4 days.
Wow.
In one location. Yeah.
Wow.
So what I did was I did a lot of location scouting, and I found this Epiphany Church. It's in Chicago. It's a gorgeous, like 5-level church that they turned into a museum and event space.
Wow.
And they love the film and project. And so they gave us a really great rate to film there for 4 days. And so I scheduled all the interviews for 3 of the days, and then all the B-roll with the ballerinas, the painter, and the cellist was all one day.
Wow.
So having the producing background, the microbudget background, I was able to just schedule accordingly. And shout out
strategic.
to yes, very strategic. Shout out to my co-producer, Maya, who really kept me, on track with that while I focused on the directing. I had 1 camera operator and 1 camera assistant. So we did this with a team of 5 of us, and my cinematographer was actually in Toronto, but she did the entire shot list for everything. And then a woman-owned camera rental house in Chicago gave us great discounts on gear.
Wow.
So
amazing.
We did the entire film in 4 days for a total of $7,000. And that was from my savings account and my full-time job. We ended up winning Best Documentary at the Women's International Film Fest in Nigeria. We premiered in Australia, screened in France with a lot of different churches. And then we also had some really great press from Religious News Service, from Christianity Today or Christian Premiere. There was a lot of different write-ups on the film, which I was very excited to see, but it really did its thing. And now it's on Tubi. So it's just the journey for that film. By the time I made that film, I'm really glad that I made the film when I did, because I was at a point in my filmmaking career where, I could make docs in my sleep. And this was the 3rd controversial documentary that I made. So I was very familiar with the process. So it wasn't anything that was, it wasn't really difficult to actually do, which is wild to say.
That's amazing. I'm 4 days, $7,000, a team of 5. You're blowing my mind. Which I don't know why, because you're the queen of microbudget independent filmmaking.
Well, and I would love to know, at least for me, in my creative process, when I'm writing or when I'm podcasting or writing films or working on films, there's so much processing that happens in the process. It's kind of therapeutic. How has your faith grown or changed through the process of making these kinds of films?
I think honestly, it's just a lot more affirmed. I feel a lot more armed and ready with information and validation that I didn't have when I was a lot younger. I didn't have the language to say that I was a feminist, when I was 7, 8 years old, but I've always been that way. I was always questioning why. I was the first person to be like, well, we don't even know if Eve actually liked Adam. I was the first person to question this whole, well, why do I have to wear a purity ring if the boys don't have to wear it? That was just always me. And for me, this definitely was a project for my younger self and giving my younger self a resource that I just didn't have. So I think in a way, it's not only deepened my faith, but it's just been really, really affirming, because I don't think that I was ever that person where my faith wavered. I think it was more so just wanting to wanting to create something that was incredibly affirming and validating in something that I already knew to be true.
Yeah.
You know, it was just very hard for me to grasp this concept that God was this being that was misogynistic. That just did not make sense to me.
Yeah.
And really being able to contextualize scripture and understand the culture and the time period where women were actually bought and sold like property. Well, it's like a lot of these scriptures in that context were written in a cultural landscape where things were not as they are now.
Yeah.
So, you know, being able to not only talk to theology folks and pastors, but historians and people who did a lot of studying of doing, what do they call it? An exegesis of the Bible. Yeah. So that was really, really, it was just really affirming and really, really helpful.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful to see how I've found personally, like within my exploration of faith, that as I hear from more and more actual like critical like database scholars, that it truly is inclusive and it truly does like it all of these layers of like misogyny and patriarchy and homophobia and all these different things like have been layered on by culture over the years. And it actually makes you think, one creator who we actually interviewed a while ago, Savannah Carreno, she recently did a post where she was saying how she doesn't understand why Christians get so hung up on thinking the Bible must exclude the LGBT community. And she's like, when I discovered that there could be a way to be inclusive as a Christian, I was so relieved because I got to then expand who I was allowed to include in my faith.
Right.
She'll talk about how like the book of Job is a book of poetry. And they're like, no, Job needs to have really happened for real. And she's like, you want the book of Job where God says, I destroyed this guy's life because I wanted to and I'm God, so deal with it. You want that to be real? Because I don't.
Right.
It's this idea of holding so tightly to these beliefs for some reason instead of actually looking at the text critically, actually understanding the context of the time, understanding ancient Hebrew literature and the way that they wrote and how they thought about stories. And it actually becomes so inclusive and so much more expansive than how us reading it through a Western lens, which is very odd to do.
Very much so. And I think also for me, just like really having discussions around language and how different words translated to different things. Something in Hebrew meant something completely different in Greek and completely different in English. And so you could read a passage in one language that can translate to something completely different. And understanding those translations and nuances, and again, just like diving into the history and starting to contextualize each and every part of it. I think that the worst thing that pastors do is just tell people, dive into the word, dive into the scriptures, or top line entire sermons with a scripture that they pulled out from one passage and take it completely out of context. It's a lot. It has to be a lot deeper than that. It just has to be. And it's a lot of work. That is also one thing, is that like faith is a lot of work, because it's not blind faith either. I think that there's a lot of Christians who are comfortable with just kind of blindly going along with things. And I was always that person that was like, but why? And I come from a household where they're like, you don't question God. And I'm like, but the Bible is full of people literally questioning God the whole time. So like,
there's so many examples.
So like, with so many examples. So like, why not? Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. And I think at least for me, I was raised in a similar, very authoritarian, this is the way God is, don't question sort of environment. But I just believed. And so like I never, and then there were things that I started questioning over time, but I felt like to be good, it was so expected and necessary that I be all in, that even in the questioning of how could you not want the Bible to be inclusive to the LGBTQ plus community, for example, now I'm like, of course.
Mm.
Like, but at the time it felt, it wasn't just a matter of, oh, I don't want that for me. Cause I think I did want that like in my gut, you know, cause in my gut I could tell all people should be treated with dignity and respect and honor and have rights and all of those things. But the training and the indoctrination, I think, prevent people from having the freedom to do so. And so I always love hearing people who explore faith with that freedom to research and to question and to evolve over time.
And it was really, really incredible to partner with inclusive churches to screen the film.
That's so special.
Because it's so special, and their entire like leadership board, you know, it was so diverse, very queer, very Black, very inclusive, lots of women. The Middle Church is one of my favorite churches. They're in New York, and we did a screening with them, and it was a virtual screening because it was at the height of the pandemic, but there were people from literally all over the world that tuned in. And the questions that, you know, that were asked and the comments that we got, it was a space that I'm like, this is the type of religious space, faith-based space that I wish that I was in when I was younger. Not the heavily indoctrinated, super rigid, extremely conservative space that, you know, again, took scriptures completely out of context and decided to make it a theme for the entire time. So yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite projects in my portfolio. I think it's timeless. I think it's something that, you know, for years to come, it's going to be relevant. And I hope that it continues to spark conversations. I hope more creative work comes from this lane of thinking, this lane of exploring feminism through faith, through Christianity. I hope more comes from that, from people who watch the film.
That is so good. I'm like, wow, I just want to like sit in that.
Well, and I get a little emotional when you talk about like creating content or explanation or research for the you as a young girl, and giving, like, providing articulation for the felt experience that you didn't necessarily have words for at the time, but being able to say, no, like, here's how we can talk about that, and here's the words that you need to understand this. And that's just really beautiful.
Yeah.
Very freeing, very healing. It's very, very healing for my younger self. My whole portfolio really is, in a way, it's therapeutic. My films are very therapeutic to me in a lot of ways, but this one especially, because growing up Christian was just like, it's such a huge part of me. My parents are still incredibly religious and incredibly conservative. We're working on them. Me and my siblings are like, they've come
slowly
a long way.
Chipping away.
They've come a long way. But like, this was being able to make this film and share it with my parents also was huge for me. And get them asking questions and thinking and that to me, it's not just about my younger self and the next generation. It's also about reaching back and being able to share it with, you know, people in previous generations, that being able to shape perspectives. I genuinely feel like it's never too late for that. Even if, you know, whoever was watching it 50, 60, there was an 80-year-old woman on the screening for the Middle Church. She was like 70, 80 years old. And that to me was just like, it meant so much because she was very receptive and very interested and hungry for knowledge and very engaged. And I think the thing about this film was that I was really anticipating a lot of like trolls. I was anticipating like some sort of backlash, as I am with any of my films. It's just something that I brace myself for, but it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And it was very well received. So yeah, it's been great all around.
So that kind of like leads me to ask the next question of like, you are tackling topics that people either don't like to talk about. You are a woman, you're a woman of color. You are just showing up and being loud with your voice, which I love. Like, we need more of that. But like, what kind of have you had to overcome obstacles, or like you just mentioned, there's a backlash that can come with some of your work, and like how do you navigate that in your space?
I get this question a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I get this question a lot. I also get asked a lot about my confidence, and my answer is always like, I have always been like this.
Mm-hmm.
My mom said that ever since I was a kid, like if I wanted to do something, I would bulldoze anyone in my way. And that's just, that is literally how I've always been. The thing that she had to constantly work with me on was like making sure I was not a bully, making sure that like I was not like, just like this dictator.
Sure.
So like, I guess I just never really felt like I had to prove myself to anyone.
Mm.
I never really felt like I owed many people an explanation for what I wanted to do either. Cause it's hard for me to look at people in a light that's other than just like, you're simply just human, so like, why should I really care about your opinion on what I want to do? That's quite literally how I've always been.
Yeah.
And that really shows up in my creative work too. And I also think, my micro-budget filmmaking approach to really sparked from being told that I couldn't do it. And that's when I'm like, no, yeah, I can. I'll figure out a way to do that.
Yeah.
I don't have any tips on confidence or like, like overcoming obstacles in terms of that.
Yeah.
I never really had obstacles. I didn't ever not believe in myself.
Right.
I've never experienced imposter syndrome because I feel like it's disrespectful to all of the work that I've put in to be where I'm at. I know I'm a really 100%. Hard worker. I've started college at 14 years old and navigated that and been through everything from sexual trauma therapy to, there's just so much in my life that I've had to overcome and I've watched myself get through. So to say that I'm not credible to be in a space or I don't know what I'm doing, I do know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean,
I
think
I am.
But what I'm hearing from you is that you have really strong internal validation. You're like, I know my shit. I'm confident in who I am. You can like have your own opinion, but that doesn't bother me. Like, and that is
for sure.
I think our culture looks a lot for external validation, which is fine. Like, it feels good. Sure. Like when other people are like praising you, but at the end of the day, you have to fall on your own self and your own, like
100%.
Your own guiding light. And so and
it's also about knowing what I don't know.
Yeah.
I am very, very quick to say, I have no idea. I am not a fake it till you make it type of person because I'm like, why am I faking it? I don't want to fake anything. Like I want to understand what it is that I'm doing and why. If I don't know something, teach me, show me. I want to learn. So I think also a lot of what we see in society, especially with women, is just kind of like this whole idea of, you have to act like you know what you're doing. But it's like, no, you just have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what you're doing, then you need to figure out what you need to do so that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can I dig into that
it's
though?
Simple.
Because it feels like what women are expressing is maybe the masculine qualities that they have observed. Right? Because there's a lot of incompetent men in a lot of spaces.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's what I need to exhibit in order to be successful. So I'm going to adopt the fake it till you make it, which to what you said, like it's counterintuitive. Just figure out what you don't know and then own your shit and move on. Like it's very 100%. Simple.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've experienced that so much, not just being in the advertising space. There's a lot more women now. It's still not many people of color, but very male dominated. Being on teams where not only am I the only Black person, but I'm the only woman. So like entire teams of white men. And that was also film school for me, and being able to observe how confidently they were able to present ideas where I'm like, what are you
You're like,
talking
yeah.
about?
Yeah.
What are you even saying? But so confident.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, imagine if you actually made sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, imagine if you actually were as smart as you thought you were.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really constantly being in a space of learning, constantly being in a space of asking questions, and actually knowing your shit.
Yeah.
For lack of better words, it's really, really important. And it's also, again, it's how I keep that imposter syndrome away. It's how I maintain confidence, because it's like, you know what you know, and you know what you don't know as well. And it's perfectly okay to say that something is not your lane, that something is not your expertise, that you made a mistake, you know, that you don't know what you're doing. There is a lot of, I'm just figuring this out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that I'm still figuring out for sure. And that's okay too.
Wow. I would love to hear the amount of times that you have heard a bunch of very confident men talk to the female experience and be like, well, I think women want.
No.
Yeah.
That's definitely coming into play with my upcoming film for sure. The next subject I'm tackling is the orgasm gap.
Thank you.
And that is I like doing a lot of controversial subjects through humor as well. I know I lean into documentary a lot, but my comedies like The Love You Won't Exist, about the couple planning the patriarchy-free commitment ceremony, or New Santa. Like, these are funny films with an underlying message. So the next project I'm tackling is tackling the orgasm gap, and we're having a lot of necessary conversations around why heterosexual women experience the least amount of orgasms, and you know what we can do to change that.
Yep.
So yeah, that for sure is definitely coming into play with the next project.
I'm so excited.
That is really exciting. I cannot wait to watch that. I'm like, tell me where the streaming is. I will log on, or I will fly there.
Or let's go to the festival.
Yes. Oh my God, let's go to the festival.
I want to support.
I'll just have like the logo of the film printed on my t-shirt, and just everyone will be like, what's that? And be like, it's the best film here. What are you talking about?
What are you talking
You don't even know? Get
I will
out.
for sure keep you all posted on how it progresses.
Is this gonna be a comedy then, or is this a documentary?
So this is a mockumentary.
Ooh.
It's like Abbott Elementary, like The Office. So it's about a social experiment. Yeah.
That is so
wow.
cool.
I'm so stoked about
I'm
that.
very excited.
Abbott Elementary.
Abbott Elementary is like one of my favorite shows right now. It's so good.
It's so good.
I love the mockumentary style. Like, I just think it's such a phenomenal way of delivering comedy. And so that's super exciting.
Where are you at in the process?
So I just I finished the script last year and copyrighted it with the U.S. Copyright Office so that no one can steal it.
Yes.
That's the first thing. There's a few companies that want to partner for co-production, but transparently, I've been in contract negotiations for about 4 months.
Wow.
Because there's certain things about the project I just refuse to relinquish. So whether or not we move forward, that's TBD. But this is also a film where, you know, there's a lot of opportunities for product placement. So there's a few companies that I'm talking to as well for branding.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're definitely in the development phase of it. So the script is done, crew is attached. Now it's just about the production partners and like the logistics of it. But that's where we're at.
I can't wait to hear.
Cool.
Yeah.
I need to listen to this podcast, I think, on repeat through my sleep to just continually remind myself I have what I need, and whatever I don't know, I can learn. And I don't have to have the confidence of a white man. I can have the confidence of a woman who knows what she's doing.
It's arguably better.
Which is arguably better. So in that sense, I've already gleaned so much wisdom from this. And so thank you for that. I was curious if you have any additional wisdom that you want to share with aspiring female filmmakers and artists as they are discovering their craft and their voice.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this ad nauseum on the podcast, but I say it at every chance I get. Just start with writing scripts according to the resources you have available to you. Oh gosh, this will be my 16th film.
Wow.
The 9th that I've directed, and a lot of filmmakers are like, how do you consistently make projects? And it's because my films, if you watch them, most of them take place in one location. Most of them can be filmed anywhere from 2 to 4 days. Most of them can be filmed with skeleton crews. So start with thinking of like, what's the most incredible thing that you can write in one room with 2 characters? There's a lot that can happen around a dinner table. That there's a lot of funny things that can happen, in one house, one room, in a car. There's a lot of terrifying things that can happen, either comedically or horror based. And just thinking of like different everyday scenarios that could be funny, that could be scary, but that could be simple to execute. So starting there, and leaning into different ways that you can even save money, like silent filmmaking, I think is something that first-time filmmakers should definitely lean into as much as possible, because you don't have to worry about, bringing on a sound op, and working on like sound editing, which can be really expensive in post-production. But if you're just focused on visuals and telling a story, that's also a way to be incredibly creative, telling a story without dialogue, telling a story without audio. Even horror films, I say that all the time, but like, it doesn't take much to scare people. So, 10 seconds of silence is terrifying. And that can, again, be in one location. So leaning into very easily executable, is that a word? Executable? Easily able to execute scripts, and writing scripts, with the resources you have, is number one. And number two, for me personally, defining success is important, but it was really important for me to learn the process. I needed to know, for me, I didn't want to be attached to the person, or I didn't want to find the person to help me do something. I wanted to learn how to do it, whether that was marketing my films, distributing my films, getting them into film festivals. Like I didn't want to have to hire a distributor, a publicist, a marketer. Like I wanted to learn to do things myself. I'm a self-taught editor. I've edited most of my films from YouTube tutorials, like just learning how to do it myself. So same with understanding contracts, taking the time to look through as many contract templates as you can and Googling what words mean. If you can get a consultation with a lawyer, so that they can give you just an overview of how to understand contracts, understanding how distribution works, your distribution rights, these things are really, really important for independent filmmakers to understand, not only so you're not exploited, but so that you can really take the reins in creating your own work, distributing your own work, building your own teams. So instead of thinking in terms of Hollywood, think of the tactical ways of what it takes to make a film and learn those processes. So yeah, that would be the filmmaking advice for sure. And stream my podcast, the Filmmakers podcast.
Definitely stream her podcast if we haven't recommended it enough already.
Well, and I so appreciate how much of an educator you are in so many ways, like, and your willingness to partner with universities and and churches and places, like, for the sake of, let's learn through the creative arts. Let's talk about this. Let's have a panel discussion. Here's a discussion book or a workbook that you can go through. So that's very cool and very unique. I feel like it's hard to find filmmakers who give their wisdom so readily and availably. So that's really cool.
Thank you. It's a really gate-kept industry. And personally, I was just tired of attending panels where they would just say, like, work hard, believe in yourself. And I'm like, that's not advice. That's not actually telling me to do anything. So I wanted my podcast to be really tactical and really tangible and very easy to follow. And also I wanted it to be something that filmmakers could walk away with ready to actually do their own thing, make their own films, write their own story. So as much as I can educate, I will continue to do so.
So Zanah, we are coming towards the end of our talk, which is very sad. But we have one question that we ask all of our guests, a question that is open-ended, up to interpretation. There's no right answer here, but we want to hear from you what you think woman being means to you.
I think it just means giving yourself permission to exist as you are. I am not the same person, not the same woman that I was 5 years ago. Yeah. I'm not going to be the same woman 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. It's so important for you, like, because being is not past tense. It's like, it's a constant, it's a progressive.
Yeah.
Right. It's current, it's present. And so understanding where you are now, enjoying where you are now, but giving yourself permission to consistently evolve. Because if I did this podcast episode 5 years ago, I would be saying completely different things. Completely. I would be in a completely different career. I probably would have different film goals, but like where I am now is where I am now. And I'm really enjoying where I am now. And I'm excited to see how I evolve, in the future. So I think being is really being present, but continuing to make space for your evolution.
Love that.
So good. Making space for your evolution. I like that. That's really good.
Yeah. Woman being is always evolving, always changing, and has the permission to, which
for sure
I think is stunning. So you've already mentioned multiple resources throughout this when it comes to, sort of Christian deconstruction with the intersectional Bible and Jesus Feminist and all those other amazing books that you brought out. We've talked about your podcast as an incredible resource, but I'm also just curious to hear if there are any other resources you'd recommend to our listeners, whether it has to do with filmmaking or creative strategy or generally feminism or Christianity or any of those things. What other resources would you recommend?
This is going to sound so generic, but Google. I swear, like I have this deck and I'll send it to you all. It's called How to Google Things.
Oh.
And it's specifically catered to strategists, but even as a filmmaker, a lot of times people ask me, how did you find that out? And I'm like, I Googled it. Like I literally just Googled it.
Yeah.
And yes, it is knowing, what to Google and what words and what sources are credible. And there's that. But the internet, we live in an era where the internet is at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of information out there. There are scripts from, blockbuster movies readily available for you to print and see the story structure and learn from those. There's shot lists listed and available online. You can Google what camera was used for, what film you're watching. You can go to IMDb and find entire crews and what they're working on. If you see a film and you're like, oh, that sounded really good, who did the sound? And then you can go and find the sound op on Instagram or Twitter. Like utilize Google, utilize the internet, like really continuously dive in. YouTube tutorials, there is a tutorial for everything, for literally everything. So if you are someone who's looking to arm yourself with knowledge and consistently learn, like utilize the internet, utilize Google. I say it all the time, but I stick by that.
Yeah, definitely. We have a wealth of information at our fingertips.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So all it takes is diving in. And I think sometimes it can feel daunting, the idea of like going in and trying to actually find the information you're looking for. Sometimes it can be easier to just say that you don't know. So
or ask someone.
Or
just ask someone.
Exactly. Someone else who already did the work to learn.
Someone who already did the work. But then it's like the downside to that is that you get their version of what they learned. And it's like you're not getting access to everything they found. You're getting a filtered answer of what it is that they're telling you.
Yeah.
So going to the source, I think is something that I consistently do as a strategist, as I do that I do as a filmmaker. Also with a lot with writing too. If I want to know something, if I'm writing a script or writing a creative brief, like I have 57 tabs open on one screen, and then I have like paper on the other screen, or like a Word doc on the other one. That's just
so. Zanah, how can the people find you? Tell us, give us all the plugs of all the things to promote and how the people can get in touch with you and keep track of you, because I'm sure that they will after this convo if they don't already know who you are.
The easiest way is just my website. It's ZanahThirus.com. First name, last name.com. ZanahThirus.com. All of my film trailers are listed there. And if you click on them, it'll say where the film is streaming. So whether it's Tubi or Amazon or Quality TV, there's a link to my podcast. There's a link to my social pages. It's the easiest way to just keep up with what I'm doing is my website. So you can just find me there.
Awesome. And we'll have that linked below, obviously, as well, so that the woman beings can come knocking at your door. Well, all of that to say, Zanah, thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturday to record with us and to chat with us. It has been such an amazing conversation. It's so fun to talk about filmmaking with such an incredible filmmaker, with someone who is doing the thing and someone who is killing it. Like it really is inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. This was such a fun conversation. And again, thank you for just taking the time and the thoughtful questions. It was a really fun discussion. So
Thank you.
Yeah, we did too. So all of that to say, woman beings, make sure that you follow Zanah and keep up with her. She has some incredible content that's already out and that's going to be coming out in the future. And make sure that you're also following us on all of our socials. Woman Being Podcast is what we are on Instagram, TikTok, all the podcast platforms. We're everywhere. And if we're not somewhere, then we'll be there if you just tell us. So you can also find us on our website, womanbeingcommunity.com. But all that to say, we're wrapping this one up. We'll be back at you with another episode next week. And that is it. So until next time.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.